Verse 2 tells us that the frogs covered the whole country. In other words, this wasn't a localized event. This didn't happen just in and around the palace. This was a national crisis. And verse 6 tells us that the frogs blanketed, they covered the land. And that verb to cover is the verb to blanket. Think about going on a picnic and you lay out a blanket on the ground. Wherever that blanket is, you can't see the ground underneath it for the blanket that's on top. That's the verb here in Exodus 8, verse 6. The frogs blanketed the whole country. So in other words, everywhere you looked across the land of Egypt, you could not see the ground for the heaving mass of frogs that was on top of it. Verses 3 and 4 tells us that the frogs were in their homes, in their bedrooms, in their beds. They were in their ovens, in their food preparation areas. They were on people. The frogs were everywhere. In fact, this was the very first Alfred Hitchcock thriller. Instead of the birds, it was the frogs. Some of you are looking at me like you have no clue what I just said. That's okay. It's all right. Ladies, imagine this. It's dinner time. So you move into the kitchen, you're ready to get dinner going, and first thing you have to do is push a dozen frogs off the countertop and wipe off the slime. You're kneading the dough, the bread is ready to, dough is ready to go in the oven. So you go over to the oven, open up the door. 62 very hot frogs just came pouring out of the oven. Guys, it's the end of a very long, very hard day. Because of the frogs, work went overtime, and you got home late, and everybody's gone to bed already. So you lock up the house, you turn off the lights, you head down the hallway, heading towards the bedroom. You can see the form of your wife under the covers, settling in for a good night's rest. You get ready for bed, you move up to the bed, you pull open the covers. It's not your wife, it's 183 frogs staring you in the face. It's mid-afternoon. Two ladies are sitting on a park bench trying to have a conversation. Their kids are trying to enjoy playing on the playground. The ladies have frogs in their laps, frogs on their shoulders, frogs on their head. One lady reaches up, grabs a frog, puts it down, only have another one come up and take its place. Oh, by the way, frogs are not domesticated creatures. In other words, they don't wait to use the litter box. Okay? Just saying. Just saying. And frogs are not quiet creatures. So the noise nationwide had to have been deafening. And if that's not enough, in verse 7, we have Frogs 2, the sequel. Because Pharaoh's magicians duplicated everything that Moses and Aaron had done. So therefore, across the nation, there was a blanket of frogs on top of a blanket of frogs. Oh, but wait, there's more. You see, the Egyptians worshipped a frog goddess by the name of Hequet. She was known as the goddess of fertility. So understand that what that meant was when those frogs arrived, you could not step on, you could not kill, you could not throw a frog out of frustration lest you offend your God. So the simple task of walking from point A to point B involved a whole lot more than just simply taking a stride, because you might step on, you might squish your God. So imagine to get anywhere, you had to shuffle along and gently nudge your God out of the way. You know, I can't help but wonder if when those frogs arrived, because the Egyptians worshipped a frog goddess, if they thought this was an omen, this was a sign. Our God was letting us know that she was blessing us. Our numbers were going to increase. We were finally going to outnumber the Israelites. However, very quickly, that perceived blessing turned into a horrific curse. What was their goddess thinking? What was she doing? She was overrunning their lives. And instead of blessing them, she was making them miserable. That brings us to verse 8 in our text. Pharaoh calls for Moses and Aaron, and he says, "Plead with the Lord to take away the frogs from me and my people, and I will let the people go and sacrifice to the Lord." Again, keep your Bibles open here, but consider what we just read in verse 8. Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron. They come into the royal chambers. I can just picture Pharaoh sitting on the throne with frogs in his lap and on his shoulder, a big, huge frog sitting in the crown of his head. And just kind of sitting there leaning, just kind of, all right, that's it. I've had it. I'm done with these frogs. ask your God to get rid of these frogs and you can go and worship. Now, on the surface, that sounds good, right? I mean, if we didn't already know the end of the story, we might think Pharaoh's finally getting his act together. I mean, that's what Moses thought. Look at verse 9. Moses said to Pharaoh, "Be pleased to command me. When am I to plead for you and for your servants and for your people, that the frogs be cut off from you and your houses and be left only in the Nile?" Moses is saying, Pharaoh, I am so glad you finally want these things gone. Pharaoh, I'm so glad to hear you say that these things are making you and everybody else miserable. Oh, Pharaoh, I am thrilled to hear you say that you understand, you recognize, you acknowledge that only God can remove these frogs from your life. Tell you what, Pharaoh, to have you save face with your people, I'm going to give you the privilege, I'm going to give you the honor of determining when. When do you want God to remove these frogs from your life? Now, hit the pause button with me for just a moment, because I have a quick confession to make. Pharaoh's response to Moses just blows my mind. I don't get it. In fact, here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to ask you a question right now, and I'd love to have you respond out loud. I'd love to have you respond enthusiastically. I'd love to have you respond with great volume. In other words, shout out the answer. Here's my question. According to verse 10, when does Pharaoh want God to remove the frogs? Shout it out. Tomorrow. Are you kidding me? Tomorrow. I can just hear Pharaoh saying, "Oh, Moses, I am so glad to hear you say that your God is ready to get rid of these frogs. But I want one more night with the frogs." No, just one more night with the frogs. Can you see the shocked look on Moses' face? And I can almost see Pharaoh saying, "Oh, no, don't misunderstand me, Moses. I know the frogs are bad. They stink, they're unclean, they're unhealthy. I get that. And I know they're not just making me miserable, they're bothering, everybody's miserable. You wouldn't believe the amount of complaints that have been pouring into our administration since the frogs have arrived. However, in spite of all that, I just want one more night with the frogs. We'll have God deal with the frogs in my life tomorrow." Let's not be too hasty in judging Pharaoh. You see, you and I are just as guilty. We have frogs in our life that we are holding on to until tomorrow. In fact, let me explain what I mean by frogs. In your notes, we have this definition: frequently recurring obstacles to growing spiritually. Frequently recurring obstacles to growing spiritually. F-R-O-G-S, frogs. We all have things that are getting in the way of our spiritual growth. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have frogs that are affecting not only us, but everyone around us. There are things we want to hold on to. We don't want to let go of them. Oh, how we love our frogs.